Maputo, Mozambique, January 14, 2026. At dawn, the sky over Maputo hangs low and heavy, a solid sheet of grey pressing down on the city. Rain has fallen through the night, not as a brief storm, but as a continuous, grinding force that has defined daily life across southern and central Mozambique since the first days of January. Streets that normally pulse with traffic are submerged, water creeping up doorways and spilling into homes. In the low-lying neighborhoods near drainage canals and river mouths, families have been awake for hours, listening to the sound of rain striking tin roofs, and wondering whether the water will rise another few centimeters before sunrise. This is not an isolated event. Since early January, persistent and intense rainfall has affected large parts of Mozambique, particularly the provinces of Maputo, Gaza, in Hambane in the south, and Sofala and parts of Manica in the center of the country. According to Mozambique's National Institute of Meteorology, several weather systems associated with the peak of the rainy season have stalled over the region, repeatedly drawing moist air inland from the Indian Ocean. As a result, many districts have recorded more than 50 millimeters of rain within 24-hour periods, with localized areas exceeding 100 millimeters in a single day. These totals are well above seasonal averages and have fallen on soils already saturated by heavy rains in December. The consequences have been immediate and severe. Rivers that normally flow calmly through floodplains have burst their banks, spreading across agricultural land and residential areas. In the central province of Sofala, where broad river basins are particularly vulnerable, water has poured into villages built close to the riverbanks. In some districts, residents report that the water rose so quickly during the night that there was barely time to gather essential belongings before fleeing to higher ground. Emergency authorities have confirmed that thousands of people have been displaced nationwide since the start of the month, many of them forced to seek shelter in schools, churches, and temporary accommodation centers set up by local governments and humanitarian organizations. In Maputo province, flooding has affected both urban and rural areas. In peri-urban neighborhoods on the outskirts of the capital, poor drainage has turned streets into shallow rivers. Vehicles stall, public transport grinds to a halt, and residents wade through water carrying children and bags of food above their heads. In rural districts further north and west, swollen streams have cut off access roads, isolating communities and slowing the delivery of assistance. Authorities have reported multiple road closures due to submerged bridges, damaged culverts, and landslides triggered by waterlogged slopes. Further north, in Sofala province, the situation is equally alarming. The region has a long history of flood disasters, and this season has followed a familiar and dangerous pattern. Rivers have overflowed into floodplains that are home to farming communities dependent on seasonal crops. Vast stretches of Cropland are underwater. Preliminary assessments by agricultural authorities estimate that tens of thousands of hectares of crops have been affected nationwide, including staples such as maize, rice, beans, and cassava. For families who rely on these harvests for both food and income, the losses are devastating. Fields that should be green and productive at this time of year are instead brown lakes of muddy water. The rainfall totals tell part of the story, but the cumulative effect is what has pushed the situation into crisis. In many areas, rain has fallen almost daily since the start of January. Even when individual storms are not extreme, the lack of dry intervals prevents rivers from receding and soils from draining. Small streams swell into fast-moving channels, and water that once drained away within hours now lingers for days. In hilly and mountainous areas, saturated ground has become unstable, increasing the risk of landslides. Several incidents of slope failure have been reported along secondary roads, blocking access and posing serious danger to residents living below steep embankments. National disaster management authorities have confirmed casualties linked to the floods and associated hazards. While exact numbers continue to be updated as assessments reach remote areas, officials have acknowledged that the death toll from weather-related incidents since December has surpassed 100 nationwide. Causes include drowning, collapsed structures, and injuries sustained during evacuations. Many more people have been injured, and countless families have lost homes or possessions. Evacuations have been a critical part of the response. In flood-prone districts, local authorities, often supported by volunteers and emergency services, have urged residents to move to higher ground before water levels become unmanageable. In some cases, small boats have been used to rescue families trapped by rising water. Schools and community buildings on elevated ground have been converted into temporary shelters. Inside these shelters, conditions are crowded. Families sleep on mats or bare floors, sharing limited space with neighbors and strangers. Access to clean water and sanitation is a constant concern, and health officials have warned of increased risks of waterborne diseases as floodwaters contaminate wells and latrines. Children are among the most vulnerable. Many have been forced to miss school as classrooms are flooded or repurposed as shelters. Parents worry not only about immediate safety, but also about the long-term impact on education and health. In several shelters, aid workers distribute blankets, basic food supplies, and hygiene kits, but resources are stretched thin. The scale of the disaster, spread across multiple provinces, makes logistics challenging. Infrastructure damage compounds the crisis. Roads are a lifeline in a country where many communities are already remote, and flooding has taken a heavy toll. Key routes linking provinces have been partially or fully cut off by water or washed out sections. Bridges, already weakened by age and previous floods, have been damaged or destroyed. This isolation delays emergency response and the delivery of food, medical supplies, and other essential aid. In urban areas, flooding has disrupted power and water supplies, leaving neighborhoods without electricity or safe drinking water for extended periods. Economic activity has also been affected. Markets struggle to operate when access roads are flooded, and supply chains are disrupted. In coastal areas and ports, rough seas and stormy conditions associated with the weather systems have complicated maritime operations, causing delays in shipping and affecting the movement of goods. While not a complete shutdown, these disruptions add another layer of uncertainty to an already fragile situation. Agriculture, the backbone of livelihoods for much of the population, faces long-term consequences. The loss of crops at this stage of the growing season threatens food security in the months ahead. Even where fields are not permanently destroyed, prolonged waterlogging can reduce yields and increase vulnerability to pests and disease. Livestock losses have also been reported, with animals swept away by floodwaters or succumbing to exposure and lack of fodder. Fish ponds, an important source of protein and income in some rural areas, have been damaged or washed out. As January progresses, meteorologists warn that the rainy season is far from over. Forecasts indicate continued rainfall in the coming weeks, raising concerns that conditions could worsen before they improve. Authorities emphasize the importance of vigilance, particularly in low-lying areas and near rivers. Communities are urged to heed evacuation orders and avoid crossing flooded roads and bridges, which can be deceptively dangerous even when water appears shallow. Yet amid the destruction and hardship, stories of resilience and solidarity emerge. Neighbors help one another move belongings to higher ground. Volunteers form human chains to pass supplies through flooded streets. Local leaders coordinate with national agencies and humanitarian partners to identify the most urgent needs. In some areas, residents who experienced similar disasters in previous years draw on hard-earned knowledge, building temporary barriers and reinforcing homes where possible. As night falls, the rain often continues, thunder rolls across the sky, and lightning illuminates the outlines of submerged trees and rooftops. For many families, sleep is shallow and uneasy, interrupted by the sound of water and the fear that another surge could come without warning. Parents keep children close, ready to move if necessary. Elders sit quietly, remembering past floods and hoping that the waters will soon recede. Recovery, when it comes, will be slow. Even after floodwaters withdraw, the damage remains. Homes must be repaired or rebuilt. Fields need to be replanted, often with limited resources. Roads and bridges require reconstruction. Health systems must address the aftermath, from injuries to disease outbreaks. The financial burden on families and the state is immense. But Mozambique is no stranger to adversity. The country has faced cyclones, floods, and droughts in recent years, and each time communities have worked to rebuild. The current floods are another test of that resilience. Every successful evacuation, every reopened road, every family that finds shelter represents a small victory against the overwhelming force of nature.